What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Friday, March 22nd, 2024. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host Phil for episode 269. Phil, I'm getting it out of the way early. NCAA bracket, March Madness is happening as we are recording right now. I haven't watched a single second of it. I haven't watched a single second of college basketball all year long. Haven't filled out a single bracket. First time in I don't know how long. I have a small statement to begin this, and I'm going to stare right at the camera. I'm doing one of these old things. No one cares about your bracket. Not a single soul on earth has ever given two farts about who you picked to win, what upsets you have, or what your bracket currently looks like. Keep it to yourself. Nobody cares. Phil, that is my public statement, and I will be taking no questions.
Yeah, it's fair. I've done brackets a handful of times, a lot when I was younger. They're fun, I guess. I mean, it's pretty interesting to keep an eye on and kind of, I don't think at the time, even if I did put money on it, it wasn't much. Usually went into a pool and, whoever won, but I don't think I ever did great. But it was fun to kind of just keep an eye on your bracket. I never really shared, like you're mentioning, if my bracket did well or bad or anything, but it was interesting to keep an eye on and see how far your teams went and how well they did. But I have not done one in quite some time. Kind of gave up care. The buzzer beaters are always exciting. I do like watching those highlights and things, or the huge upsets that you hear about. I'll go back and watch those highlights because I think upsets are fun. Not for the good school, but the upset school. It's a good time. So I do still like the action of the March Madness and the tournament and everything. And it's a lot of fun for a lot of people that care a lot about that stuff. I don't really care that too much about it, but like I said, I'll follow the upsets and things. But yeah, as far as your specific bracket goes, the only time anyone's going to care is if you're that one bracket a year that is almost flawless or wins, the big prize. I don't even know what it is anymore. It used to be $1 million was the biggest bracket pool out there, like an ESPN really, really high up one. And somebody occasionally would do really well and have 99% of the bracket correct, including insane updates. Those are fun to kind of look at, but other than that, yeah, no one cares.
Yeah, you can give me the ESPN updates where it's there's only 3 perfect brackets still left,
right,
and there's only 2 perfect. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But I don't need to see your brackets. Don't
right.
send them to me. I don't care. And now I this is one of those benefits of not being this big, massive podcast around the world, because a statement like that, where if you're the fantasy footballers or the basement yard boys or any of those bigger podcasts around, if you were to say a statement like I did, I feel like all of your DMs and all of your social media would just get flooded with that kind of stuff. So I'm happy that we're not that big for that reason. But yeah, I like those small stats because I'm a stat guy, but I don't need to see your bracket. I don't need to see that, hey, up here in the West Coast or the West bracket, I got everything. I nailed the 13 over a 4 seed. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Right, if you're doing it and you're enjoying it, that's fine. We're not saying don't.
Right.
Go do a bracket, have fun.
Yeah,
like
you.
I said, they're a
do
good time.
you.
Right, but you just don't. There's no reason to share it or share your frustrations with everybody. That's.
Yeah. So. Yeah, if you side with me, like Phil does, apparently, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Phil's article dropped on Tuesday, breaking down the Rock Bandits game, and then my power rankings for the first time in 2 weeks are back out there on the website as well, because last week I took a break. But look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. We will start with the Buffalo Sabres. Yep.
And that's it.
That's Monday versus Seattle, out West Coast. They've never beaten them in the history of Seattle's franchise. Never happened until Monday night. They won 6-2. Skinner had a hat trick, the first hat trick for the Buffalo Sabres all of this year. They had 8 total last year. And brings his goal score total up to 24. He could get to 30 again. He's just a goal scorer. Tage Thompson, Tuck, and Power were the other goal scorers. UPL 32 of 34 saves. Shots were 34-30 in favor of Seattle. And then you flip forward to Tuesday. Buffalo has a chance to inch a little bit closer to the playoffs, and nothing happens. They lose to Vancouver 3-2. Dahlin was the only goal scorer, having both of them. Levi started in this one 31 of 33 saves. Shots were 34-17 in favor of Vancouver. Vancouver doubled them up there.
Yeah, I mean, the Seattle game was really good. I thought, especially their first time, the first game out west can be really tough. Seattle's obviously, like you mentioned, been really a big struggle for the Sabres in general. So it was a really good game. I mean, honestly, the offense looked good, the defense looked good, and UPL looked good. It was a very complete team victory and what you want to see to start a pretty tough West Coast trip. And then Vancouver is literally the next day, which can be tricky, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But you lose 3-2 and you look awful. They just looked terrible. They looked flat. They looked exhausted. They looked like a team playing back-to-back games. And honestly, if it wasn't for Levi, I think that game would have been much, much worse. And if it wasn't for Levi and Dahlin, it would have been much, much worse. And I thought the only real bright spot, really, really big bright spot, other than Skinner's 3 in Seattle for both of those games, was the goalies. I thought they played really well in both games, and I think that is hopefully something you will see in the future, a little bit of a 1A, 1B tandem. Hopefully those two continue to grow together and the Sabres are able to keep both of them. But heading into this year, I don't think we thought we'd be in this situation as far as if you looked at a 2-game set, what was the most consistent aspect of play. I wouldn't have said it was going to be the goaltending, and to see the goalies playing as well as they are, and the team still not able to get, 2 wins in those 2 games. I mean, Levi only giving up 2 goals, and you still can't come through with pretty much any offense at all. I mean, your offense did nothing. Dahlin did everything, and he even made some incredible last-minute empty net saves as well to, really just put his body and heart on the line there for the team, and to see them so dejected with the loss. But they just played terrible against Vancouver, and the Seattle win was exciting, but you just, once again, you're in that back-to-back win one, lose one, and you've dug yourself such a massive hole in this season that you cannot play like this if you want to make playoffs. And here we are. This is why you don't play really, really bad for, half or 3/4 of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened last year, except last year they were right in it right up until the end. I mean, they had a playoff spot in February of last year, and then it kind of sank away. But yeah, I thought they played one of their better games all season versus Seattle. And, Seattle goes up 24 seconds into the game, 25 seconds later, Tage scores, and then 5:41 into the game, you're up 3-1. And then they weren't the team that just maintained the lead. They built on it, and they were great 5-on-5. Skinner goals started flowing, so he's a streaky goal scorer. Can he go on a bit of a run here and get to 30? UPL, like you mentioned, he was great again. But then the Vancouver game next night, and I understand it's back-to-back nights, but it's not like you got a tired UPL in net. You got a Levi in net who gave you a opportunity to win this game. And what stinks the most is when you had a goalie in net, it was 2-2. And I am not critiquing Don Granato for pulling Levi when he did, because the stats prove when you're down like that in the final minute, it's nearly impossible to come back. So that's why you pull your goalie a little bit earlier to get that man advantage earlier and try to capitalize. And they scored later on, but it goes back to like what you said. Early on in the year, they struggled so much to find consistency with their forward group. They were getting good goaltending all year long. If they would have gotten this goaltending last year, how many times have we said this? If they gotten this goaltending last year, they'd be in the playoffs. They might have even had, one of the top 3 seeds in their conference. But when your offense is as inconsistent as it has been, this is the results. And the window of error is just so small now. Like I heard they're playing the Oilers tonight, Thursday when we're recording for out in West Coast. I think it starts at like 9 o'clock, so we don't have those results. But I believe I saw a stat where if they were to win in Edmonton, their playoff odds would go to like 8%. So that's where they're sitting right now. It's not a good spot to be in for the Buffalo Sabres. They're not dead and in the water. I mean, that game Sunday versus the Detroit, or Saturday. I apologize. Saturday. If they would have won that one, the odds would have been much better. But I even said going to the West Coast here, and in these 5 road games, you needed to take 4 of them. Right now, they've have 1 of the 4, so it's not a good spot they're sitting in right now.
Do you want me to go through my stats?
Yeah. I know you got a fun stat if you wanted to throw out the one stat of back-to-back.
Yeah, so I've always wondered, and we've talked about this a lot over our years of covering, that the Sabres particularly seem really bad on their second game and back-to-back games. So I did a quick Google to see what was out there as far as stats go for how NHL teams do in back-to-back games. And there's a NHL reporter for ESPN named Ryan Clark. He wrote an article February 14. If you do get a chance to read it, it's very detailed, not just about back-to-back games, but road games, East Coast to West Coast, West Coast to East Coast, what it all means, who's got the most, who's got the least. Really in-depth, very interesting read as far as just how it affects players' bodies, and a few players were interviewed for it as well. But basically, there have been just over 3,000 games in the last 5 seasons that have been back-to-back, and if on either leg, so the total for those 2 games for the back-to-back teams, the winning percentage is .531, and the winning percentage for the first game is .555. Winning percentage for the second game is .507. So pretty much 50-50 as far as back-to-back games go. This year, the Devils had the most back-to-back games with 16, and the Seattle Kraken had the fewest with 7, and that's just a stat to show, I don't know, I feel like that's very unfair of the NHL to have one team have more than double the lowest teams back-to-back, because, I mean, they seem tougher in general, but to have one team with 7 and one with 16 just seems like brutal scheduling. But a little paragraph I'm going to read, mainly because it talked about Eastern Conference teams going to Vancouver, which is the exact game we just talked about. So I don't know who this person is. Also published a study on time zones and changes in travel distance and performance in the NHL, and are almost chronically out of order with their circadian rhythm or internal clock. He said an Eastern Conference team that goes to Vancouver to play the Canucks is at a disadvantage because a player's circadian clock is usually within the rhythm of his home city. For example, a Canadian player's body is used to the game starting at 7 Eastern time. So for a game in Vancouver with 7 p.m. Pacific start time, his circadian rhythm interprets it as a 10 p.m. Eastern game. They said by the time the game's over, for an Eastern Conference team going to the West, you're thinking that, you get to the third period, essentially the paragraph kind of kept going on to say, like, oh, they're fatigued, it's exhaustion. And at the same time, he was saying, well, kind of, but at the same time, your body thinks it's midnight right now compared to what you're used to. So they said that teams going from east to west have it much tougher than teams going west to east, because your body is essentially supposed to be sleeping and you're in the middle of an NHL hockey game. So I thought that was interesting that they threw out Vancouver specifically, because we just played Vancouver. But yeah, 50-50 chance of winning. So not really like a crazy back-to-back terrible win percentage. Like, it's not like 400 or 300. Like, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose that second game. 50-50 is not good, but it's not the worst in the world either. And I feel like the Sabres, since we've been covering them, their back-to-back is brutal in that second game. They always just come out flat and dead and depressing.
Yeah, that's pretty stinking over my head type of stats, but I absolutely love it. So I'm glad you find those numbers. But just to take a look at the standings real quick, it has not much has really changed. The Sabres are 5 back of the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit has a game in hand. Ahead of Buffalo is the Islanders, 68 games played, 73 points. Washington, 68 games played, 75 points. So to me, you're really chasing the Capitals at the moment, because the Capitals have the most points and the least amount of games played. So if you want to give them a win, it puts them even with Detroit with games played, but they're at 77 points and they're surging right now. So really, you're still don't have the games in hand. The teams ahead of you do, and you don't have the points. I mean, I think Pittsburgh, you got a nice edge on, but again, they still have games in hand. You have the most games played right now out of all the teams around you, which is not the thing that you really want. You want those games in hand. But the one thing that you do have an advantage over is the goal differential that you're sitting with right now. You're sitting at +2. The two teams in front of you, the Islanders are minus 23, and the Capitals are minus 31. So, I mean, this is what we've been saying for all year long now, Phil. Overtime losses as well. Islanders have 15. Washington has 9. You're chasing those teams as well who, 15 points of the 73 have come because you lost in overtime. 9 points for the Capitals have come from the 75 because you lost in overtime. Buffalo has 5. That's another point where even if you're losing, you can't even get that loser point in overtime. So it's looking bleak. They're not dead in the water right now, but they haven't been able to put any type of streak together more than 2 times now. So really they need to go on this massive streak just to have a chance with 12 games left, and it'll be 11 by the time everybody's listening to this. But I don't really have anything else with the Sabres, Phil, unless you do.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing better for sure. I mean, it's upsetting to have to talk about a team that is playing better so negatively, but that's where we are in the season. Like, this is crunch time. They, like you just mentioned, have to win pretty much every single game, and they're not doing it. Like, are they playing much better hockey overall? Like, if this was the beginning of the season, I'd be excited. They'd be doing pretty fantastic. They're playing well. They're winning some big games, losing some close ones. Like, you can kind of write those off. Be like, okay, we lost to Vancouver. That's a bummer, but it was a back-to-back. You just crushed Seattle in a really good-looking game. Like, if this was early in the season, all of this sounds great. Like, that 2-game set is survivable, but now it's not. And so we have to talk about this team pretty depressingly when they are playing better hockey. But again, you have to go on a massive run in order to keep your playoff hopes alive and really try to make a push for that last wild card spot. And they are not doing it. It's because the margin for error, like you said, is just so thin right now.
Yeah, I mean, in the 12 games, you probably have to get 10 of the 12. And the teams that you play that are ahead of you right now, you have to take the whole 2 points. You can't take it to overtime and give them one of the loser points. But that's pretty much all for the Sabres. We'll be able to break down a couple. Actually, I think it's just one more game because I think they face Calgary Sunday late when we're recording anyway, so we won't even have that game. We'll just have the Edmonton game, and everybody will complain, oh, they played this one on Thursday, and it's Monday, and you're just talking about it now. Relax. Take a chill pill. If you don't like it, you can skip around. That's why we put the time breakdowns in the description of the show, and one of them will start right here with the Buffalo Bandits. Bandits versus Panther City, another Friday game. Not a fan of these Fridays, Phil. I know we have the weekend to better dissect it, but we've noticed that our episode numbers take a bit of a dip when there's a Friday game because there's less time to consume this episode before the game even starts. So we've been trying to pump this out a little bit earlier on Friday so people have that time to listen. But it's their first meeting ever, first time ever going down to Texas to play lacrosse, first time ever playing Panther City. Just to go over Panther City a bit because I don't think a ton of, average fans, and this is not an insult to those average fans, might not know a bunch about Panther City. They play out of Fort Worth down in Texas, and they were expansion team, 3? I think this is their 3rd year in the league now. But just to go over their season so far this year.
Was the first one.
Okay, so yeah, this is their 3rd year. So here are their wins so far this year. 11-7 over Vancouver, 14-12 over New York, 21-12 over Las Vegas, 14-13 over Colorado, 10-9 over Georgia, and 9-8 over Philly. Here are their losses. They're 11-10 versus Las Vegas, 13-10 versus Toronto, 12-10 versus Georgia, 10-9 versus Saskatchewan, 10-9 versus San Diego, 19-15 against Rochester, and just recently 13-9 versus Halifax. And you might be wondering, why am I going so specific into a team that is currently sitting at 6-7, and Buffalo's sitting at 7-6? Well, to dive a little bit deeper into those numbers, they're 2-6 when they score fewer than 10 goals, and they're 4-1 when they score 11 or more. So I think the magic number there is right around 10. And as we dive deeper into the numbers and the players here, I think it is a realistic possibility that in this game on Friday night, Buffalo could theoretically keep Panther City to 10 goals, and that would give the Buffalo Bandits a very good chance to walk out of Texas flying back to Buffalo victorious and sitting at 8-6.
I think the other interesting thing about those losses are who they're losing to. Outside of Vegas up there, I mean, you got Toronto, Georgia, the Rush, who gave the Bandits quite the headache, San Diego, Rochester, Halifax. I mean, those are all top teams in the league, you know?
Yep.
So their wins, other than beating Georgia 10-9, I mean, they've come against the bottom of the league, other than, yeah, again, Georgia, but their losses are coming against the top of the league. Yes, a lot of these are really, really close games, so I don't want fans or the Bandits to overlook this team. I mean, 11-10, 13-10, 12-10, 10-9, 10-9, 13-9. Like, none of those are brutal losses other than the 19-15
They're in
to
every
Rochester.
game.
Right, exactly. And that's huge. I mean, that's really big to talk about, that this could be a very, very close game. And this team, I mean, 2 1-goal losses right there. If you switch that, this team is higher in the standings and being talked about a little bit differently. Even 12-10 to Georgia, 3 1-goal losses. Sorry. I mean, again, it was same like Dane Smith was talking about the Bandits in this season. Like, they've lost a few of those 1-goal games that they were winning last year. Same with Panther City this year. Like, they've lost 3 1-goal games. If you come out on top in those 3 games, this team's looking a lot different. And we're talking about this game a little bit more intensely. So 6-7, they're in a playoff spot right now. I think that's the other really, really big thing about their standings, and something we can't quickly forget about the Bandits is that they were just on a 3-game losing streak. They were recently under 500 and just got back to 500. And now, luckily, on the 2-game winning streak, they're over 500, but they're still in the thick of a playoff race. Like, just because they are 5th currently doesn't mean they're out of it by any means and like safe. You know, they still have to win all of these games for the most part, especially if you want to push for 4th. But Panther City is the team currently in a playoff spot, pushing to remain in that playoff spot. And like I just mentioned, all these close losses against good teams, they're fighting for their playoff lives. They're going to be playing very, very desperate lacrosse. So I think it's important to go over all those wins and losses, because this team is not quite 6-7. Like, clearly they are, but it doesn't look quite as bad when you really go over the wins and losses. And like you mentioned, a few of the close ones, but if the Bandits can hold them to 10 or fewer, we will have a good shot of winning.
Yeah, I think what is nice about this, looking at those close losses that Panther City has, is what has Buffalo just done the past 2 weeks is they've won close games. And you're not even just looking at the losses that Panther City took and what the score was. You're looking at, like you said, who they lost to. Toronto, 3-goal loss. But Toronto's a very veteran-savvy team, so they came out on that side of it. San Diego, Panther City lost by 1, but San Diego, veteran-savvy team. Halifax, 4-goal loss. Halifax, veteran-savvy team. So a lot of these top teams that, yes, they're losing to, but they're also veteran-savvy teams that have been in these positions, these close battles. Panther City doesn't have those same type of veteran players. They got Callum Crawford. They got Will Malcolm. They got Tony Malcolm. They got a few of these veteran-savvy players, and I'm saying veteran-savvy quite a lot. I'm just noticing this. So I apologize for that. But I think what you're also noticing is they got Jonathan Donville. Very, very good player, but on the younger edge. He doesn't have that same type of experience as the other players. But Buffalo's, they've been through it. They've seen this. They've been through these gauntlets before. They felt this pressure before, so it's not going to be anything new to them. And they just came off of 2 victories where it was very close all the way through. So I think that also helps them, but you also got to remember, you were summing up perfectly that this is a very important game and you can't take this team lightly. If Buffalo loses to Panther City, both teams go to 7-7, and because of the head-to-head matchup here, Panther City has the edge over Buffalo. So you already slipped behind Panther City. You got Rochester in between you, who's sitting at 6-6 right now. Georgia's right behind you, but they have the edge over you as well. So these tiebreakers are very important. That's why this matchup is a very important matchup, because in those clusters, yes, Buffalo's sitting in that 5 seed, but they're 7-6. Right behind them's Georgia at 8-7. Rochester 6-6. Panther City 6-7. Saskatchewan 5-6. New York 6-8. So all these teams are so bunched up that those head-to-head tiebreakers might come into huge. They might have a huge effect towards. Yes, they might have a huge effect later on in the season. And when it comes down to seeding, where you want every edge that you possibly can, and Buffalo doesn't have a bunch of head-to-head advantages right now. They don't have it over Halifax. They don't have it over Albany. They don't have it over Georgia. You want this head-to-head advantage over Panther City just because of how close this race is. And if you lose, you do fall behind them in the standings. But Phil, before we dive into the actual numbers and the players to watch, let's go over our first sponsor, and I'm going to get this one started for the first time ever, so let's see how this goes. Our first sponsor for this episode and our first sponsor ever is Tap That Tap Room at 363 Delaware Street in Tonawanda, New York, Buffalo's first woman-owned self-pour bar. Phil, there's been a bunch of comments and a bunch of people asking, not just this year, but in previous years, hey, it's an away Bandits game. I might not have ESPN Plus. I might not have the ability to watch it on TV. Where can I go to watch a Buffalo Bandits game? And Tap That Tap Room, in my opinion, is one of the best places to watch it because, one, you get to watch it with a bunch of other Bandits fans. We got to experience that. Yes, they lost versus Halifax, but it was still a great environment. They're having a watch party there. If you don't have season tickets, they give away tickets to the next home game, which guess what? Fan Appreciation Night. Yeah, I'd want those tickets because they give some free stuff away. But on top of that, they turn up the volume at those games. So you get to actually listen to the game. If you want to drown it out a little bit, it's not like it's blasting in your ear. You can still talk to the person next to you. We were having conversations the whole time going over what the game was, but you can also hear what's going on in the game. You can hear the commentators. So you get the best of both worlds. And like I said, you get to listen to it and watch it with a bunch of Buffalo Bandits fans. There's not much better than that type of environment right there.
And another event that they are kicking off for the first time ever this Saturday is their first paint night cheer and beer starting at 4 p.m. And with that, you can grab as little or as much as you want of their 30 beers, ciders, sours, seltzers, and malt beverages that they currently have on tap. You can grab your painting supplies that are included with your ticket that you need to purchase for that evening. And then you get to have a great evening, getting creative, having some drinks. And there are only 9 tickets remaining for this paint night. Go there, have some different styles of what's on tap, have some beers and whatever you are interested in, and you get to paint and have a good time being creative. I am a terrible artist. I've made some pretty solid stick figures in my day, but that is about the best I can do. This will be a once-a-month event moving forward, so make sure you follow Tap That Tap Room on Facebook and Instagram and go to their website for more information.
Yeah, I was drawing in my hand a little bit there, Phil, and I show the audience, and it's probably worse than your stick figure. I'm not a very good painter. I'm not a good drawer. I'm not a good writer. I can barely spell my own name right. I have a lot of flaws, Phil. But let's dive into the Buffalo Bandits, who are not having any. Bandits are not having any flaws recently. They're getting better and improving in many ways, and one of them is the goal scorers. And Buffalo goals for per game average is sitting at 12.85, which is third in the league. Panther City is down at 7th at 11.62. Now, this did get better. But the number's not good. Buffalo goals against average for the year, 12.69, which is 14th in the league. Yeah, there's only 15 teams, Phil. And then Panther City goals against is sitting at 11.46, 7th in the league. So they're 7-7. Buffalo is 3-14. So a little bit of an area to get better. But again, they got better last week because they broke the streak.
Yeah, I think one thing with their defense is, we've known about the roster changes and the rookies and everything. They've had, I don't want to call them excuses, but they're, I think, fair reasons that they have not been doing as well as they should have. Honestly, when the backup goalies were in, when Vince was out, I thought they played okay. So I'm not even going to blame them for this number. And it was only 2 games, so really not going to blame them for this. But I think the big thing with the Buffalo defense, which is clearly, 14th in the league, is mind-blowing to think of the Bandits being that low in any category. So to see that number sounds terrible, looks terrible, but I think as they get healthier and the addition of Paul Dawson being a veteran back there with the rookies, I think their defense is just going to get better and better for these last few games. And honestly, if they can tighten things up back there, it sounds insane, I guess, but that is one area that if they can get healthy, I'm really not all that concerned about. Seeing them at 14th, it seems like something you would sound, the panic bells out. They're literally second last in the entire league in goals against, but I'm really not worried about the defense. If they can turn it around, which I guess is what I'm more saying, I do believe they can turn it around. If they get healthy out there, if they get Bomberry back with Dawson back there, and they just get a proper roster, I think they're already headed in the right direction as far as the defense goes. And with Vince back there, I think he played one of his best games of the entire year last game against Toronto. So I think they are headed in the right direction. The offense has been incredible the entire season. So I think if the defense can catch up and get healthy and just play like we know they know how to play, I think that this team is going to be really, really scary down the stretch. And at the same time, we know what they've looked like all year. So I'm really hoping it doesn't fall apart.
Yeah, even for me, it's less about health. I know that factors into it, and it's less about who's back there. For me, it's more about continuity. They just haven't had the same rotation of guys back there, and that plays a massive effect. Where, like last year, you saw the offense, and you're going, the offense didn't struggle as much last year when they were losing all these pieces. I feel like defense, the communication and needing to know where the guys are on the back end has a bigger effect for the defense than it does the forwards, because forwards, you're passing the ball around. You can see where the ball is. There's one ball, so your eyes are always on the ball unless you're setting a pick there. It's less about, needing to know where the guy's going to be on the offense, because if you make a mistake, it's just going the other way. On defense, if you're assuming the one guy is going to be switching off and you've never really played with him, or you've played a handful of snaps and he doesn't switch off, and it's in the back of your net. Like that's right. The issue, where if you make a mistake on forwards, it's just going the other way. If you make a mistake on defense, it's in the back of your net and the opponents have goals. So I think that's another big factor that maybe the people aren't talking about enough when they're just seeing that massive number, the 12.69. And they're kind of just going, Matt Vince has struggled, and then you had 2 games without him, and then there's too many rookies here, and the veterans are aging out, and all that kind of stuff. But then you got to remember, how many of these guys, how many shifts have they actually played together? How many practices have they actually played together? I mean, I think you were the one that posted the thing about how many seasons are missing from the back end, whether it's Ethan O'Connor out the door or the players that have been hurt.
37 or something.
37 combined seasons or something like that among the defenders that are out. It's ridiculous. And I think that alone will help the back end if you can just stop getting players injured and just slowly add guys back that have played in this system before and played with these other guys before, because it can only get better from here. We've seen them take steps, and there's less obvious glaring holes, but I feel like those small things will work themselves out as you play more and more together and you don't continuously lose a player. Fingers crossed, Phil. Fingers crossed. I don't think we saw an injury on the defense, and it sounds like the rumors are there that Adam Bomberry likely could have played in that Toronto game, but Buffalo wanted to give him a little bit more rest, so I'm hoping you see him in Panther City on Friday night, because that would be a massive addition to the back end, and then you'll also be able to figure out, hey, is he going to take over the penalty kill spot, give Cam Wires a few less shifts back there, a few less responsibilities, and maybe grow his 5-on-5 game a little bit more. But let's go over the players here. Forwards, righties, Phil Caputo, number 19. Jonathan Donville is their top young guy, number 3. Matthew Gauthier, number 17. And then Callum Crawford. He's been in the IR the last few weeks, but he was questionable last week. So I would expect him back in this game, especially since it's a home game. And then Ryan Sheridan, number 92, he's a rookie. For the lefties, Jason Knox, he's a rookie, number 11. Will Malcolm, he's having a very solid year, very quiet solid year, number 4. And then Ty Thompson, he killed the Bandits when he was with Albany last year, but he's only played in 2 games, so fingers crossed he will not be in the lineup.
Yeah, they have more talent, I think, than it seems. Again, I feel like it's hard to talk about this game because I think Panther City is just seen as a weak team because of their record, because of who they are. They just haven't. They're new. They're new to the league. They haven't, cemented themselves as a top team yet. They're new. They've been slowly getting better, but even their record this year, you're like, oh, okay, they're under 500, so they're not that good. They're a better team than what it shows on paper. And even like all the names you just mentioned, like if you really look at it, yes, I mean, Malcolm's a pretty big name. Crawford's a big name. But like you said, there's a lot of younger players and just less known players on this team, but they're still good. And they still have a pretty spread out offense as far as talent on both sides. I mean, you have your powerhouse on each side with Malcolm on the left and Crawford on the right if he ends up playing. And if not, you have Donville on the right. So you still have one of each side, and then they're fill-in guys outside of that. Gauthier, Caputo, both over 30 points. Knox over 30 points. So their lefties are a little bit weaker. Their righties are a little bit stronger, especially if Crawford plays. But they still have depth pieces that can score when they need somebody to step up. So I think it's just an easy team to overlook based on the fact that they don't have a ton of history, but it is even just their offensive players. Again, they're not huge names, especially to Bandits fans, because they are a West Coast team that, again, like you mentioned as we started, this is the first time they're ever seeing each other. So really a team you're very unfamiliar with. So you might not know these players all that well, but they do have some pretty solid offensive talent that the defense does have to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and Jason Knox, he might only have 34 points on the year, but he has heated up as the season goes on. He's one of those rookies that took a minute to figure out the league, and he's kind of stepped up. I believe he had a 4-goal game, so he's nobody to really take lightly. Ryan Sheridan, he's a monster of a man too, Phil. I mean, he's smaller than like a Dawson Theed or a Mike Triolo, but he's got a lot of height to him. And then Will Malcolm, he is kind of like Dane Smith light, where he's looking more to dish it than to score. I mean, on the power plays, 4, 14, and 18. So along with this is another reason you got to stay out of the box in this game. We need the good Paul Dawson in this game. We need the good Nick Weiss in this game. We need the good Steve Perillo in this one. Don't take undisciplined penalties, because this power play is one of the best in the league. They're very, very good. They might not be the same without Callum Crawford, but again, I'm expecting him to play in this game. And, he's 10, 12, and 22 on the power play. Do not give this team extra opportunities on the special teams, because they will bury you. So defense and transition, Tony.
Switch over to defense.
Yep.
I think last game that wasn't talked about enough, and I don't even know if I mentioned in my article, even though I wanted to. It got kind of lengthy. The way the Bandits handled themselves last game, I know they had some penalties early, but I thought the refs were calling things pretty tight in general for both teams.
And it wasn't like undisciplined penalties either. It was more like ticky-tack.
Huge thing, especially against Toronto. Like, that is a very heated rivalry. And to see the Bandits really not fight after the play, even there were a few in the crease with Nick Rose, and after, I think it was one of the burn goals where everybody, like a lot of Toronto players were on top of them, they just went over, picked him up, and ran off the field. Like, to see them play very reserved against their biggest rival in a very, very heated lacrosse game was incredible. And I don't know if it was this game or last game against the Rush, where Dane Smith was mentioning, like, if we stay out of the box, we're a much better team. So I think the team knows it, they understand it, and that's fine. But to see them actually put it into practice against one of their biggest rivals and not have all this chippy attitude, to not fight after the play, to not just to stay reserved and stay calm, and just like you said, they weren't undisciplined penalties, the ones that they got, other than maybe Johnny yelling from the bench, but that'll happen. So outside of that one, though, they weren't overly aggressive penalties, and that's all we've been looking for from this team for a very long time. So to see them be able to pull that off against one of their biggest rivals was nice. To see them finally just have a game where they weren't completely hot-headed against even a team like Albany, where they're just beating them up for we don't understand why. But it was really good to see them kind of flip that switch and actually play a very clean game of lacrosse.
2 games in a row, too, because that wasn't we didn't see that much in the Rush game either, even though, after the Vancouver game, we're like, hey, you haven't seen this team in over 2,000 days. How are you going to get mad at them? But let's go over the defense and transition now. Tony Malcolm in the back end, number 2. He's very good in the transition game, 6-13 and 19, 87 loose balls, 14 caused turnovers. He could be in discussion for transition player of the year. You got Matt Hosick. Yes, Graham Hosick's brother. Not as good, though, but he's still very solid. I mean, there's only one Graham Hosick, so that's not really a shot at Matt Hosick at all. 73 loose balls, 21 caused turnovers, 11 block shots. Connor Sellers, 10 block shots. You got Pat Foley back there. He's got 11 caused turnovers. A lot of these guys either get the caused turnovers with the block shots or vice versa, one or the other. But they're very, very good back there. Ronnie Pooch, number 16, he's a rookie. He was their main faceoff guy, but they got a big-time faceoff man back in Tyler Burton. I think he's going to be the main guy that's taking those draws. He's 19 of 46, 41% so far. So again, he's only played in 2 games, but I expect he's the main one at the dot. So I think this will be for those that actually care about the faceoffs as much as you do for whatever reason.
He's back. Your audio cut out. I don't know if
it might have been on your end. I'm still talking. Okay. I'm still getting the wavelengths on my end. So, Tyler Burton. I think this could be a big Connor Farrell game. I don't expect him to go 27 of 33 at the dot, but I think this could be a very good game for Connor Farrell to get a couple of those more extra possessions. And we talked about this very briefly. I'm not going to go on a big rant, but one stat that I would like to see is number of shifts in a game, not the number of shots, not the face-off wins and stuff like that. I think a true indication would be to figure out how many offensive shifts you get. So when the ball goes to the other team, that counts to me as a shift change. I want to see what the number of shifts are. So if there's anybody back there that wants to watch every single game and keep track of those, I would like to see what those shift numbers are at the end of the game to figure out, hey, if you win these amount of draws, are you actually getting more offensive possessions rather than, hey, you lose the draw, they don't score, you get the offensive possession. So really, that to me would be a better indication if faceoffs truly matter than all the other stats that might be out there. A majority of the other stats that would be out there is, do you actually get more offensive possessions winning a faceoffs, or does it truly not truly impact the amount of chances you get trying to score the ball?
Yeah, it would be really interesting. I do think it's going to be a good Farrell game, like you mentioned. I mean, hopefully he's healthy, number one. I would assume he is, but we don't know for sure. But hopefully he's healthy and gets the play time. And in general, it was really good to see him make the adjustment toward the second half of the game, especially in the fourth quarter when the Bandits started scoring a lot. There wasn't a ton of faceoffs in the third. I think he started the second half against Toronto 0 for 2 and then went 6 of the last 14, and he won 6, lost 8, so pretty much 50-50 against one of the better face-off guys in the entire league. So really good to see him make those adjustments as well, outside of just being sick. Really good to see him improve in the second half. So I'm excited to see how he just progresses as a player and what he continues to take from the NLL game and learn, especially from a guy like TD Erlin, like going up against him for that many face-offs. I'm sure he learned a lot of things in that game as to how to beat a guy like that and just how to make himself a better face-off guy for the NLL. So interested to see what he learned and how he kind of applies it to this game. And as far as the defense goes, like we said about pretty much everything with this team, they're definitely not as bad as it might seem. Their goals against really isn't too bad. We'll go into their goalie momentarily, but I would love to have Graham and Matt on one team, and specifically if it was the Bandits and not any other team, but they would be one heck of a dynamic defense of duo in the NLL if they were on the same team. But 21 caused turnovers, like you mentioned, a lot for even Matt Hozak, and then all of them, for the most part, they have a lot of players that have more than 10 caused turnovers. Whenever you see that, that means that pretty much every defensive player has the ability to pick that ball off, and you really have to kind of be not careful with your passes. I'm not telling you like the offense is going to change in any way or change their strategy, but it is a team that has the ability to probably cause a few more turnovers from the offensive side than maybe your average team does. So it's going to be interesting against two teams that have never seen each other on the offensive and defensive side. All you have is tape, and tape is fantastic and it teaches you a lot, but until you go and play that team, look at the Bandits in Toronto. Like, they've seen each other so many times, and one of the few teams they played twice this year. I think having just that game of experience even within that season is very important. So for two teams that have never seen each other, it's going to be really interesting to see how these two teams match up.
So before we dive into the goalies, let's go over our second sponsor, Mr. Sizzles. Phil, I'm buying you a little bit more time so you can scroll up a bit, but Mr. Sizzles is our second sponsor of the show. Phil, take it away.
Yep, they are our second sponsor ever, currently at 346 Connecticut Street in Buffalo, New York. They are open 7 days a week, 11 to 11, with a fantastic brunch menu on Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3.
And Phil, do you know what is coming up in 24 hours?
Brunch.
Yes, our weekend. Weekend is coming up. They do, like Phil mentioned, Saturday and Sunday brunch runs from 11 to 3. So I thought it would be a good idea to pick a nice little food choice, and I'm going to pair it with something to drink. And it's a little cold outside, Phil, wouldn't you say? Like, I was working outside all day today, and my fingers were just absolutely killing me. So I want something a little bit more warm. And, brunch is a little bit early. Some people like to sleep in, so you get a little bit of kick with my meal here. So I'm going the loaded tots. You got tater tots with cheese sauce, chopped bacon, pickled jalapenos, sour creams, and scallions. Then I'm going to pair that with a brunch cocktail, Phil. It's called Morning Wake Up Call, and everybody needs a wake-up call. I'm not a very good morning person. I roll out of bed and just start working. Like, I let the dogs out, then I go to work. I don't really have food, but this all sounds delicious. It's vodka, songbird coffee liqueur, house made cold brew coffee. I'm sorry, I wrote code for whatever reason, but it's cold brew coffee and cocoa bitters. Phil, what do you think of my pairing there? It's a little bit weird to put coffee with loaded tater tots, but it's the morning brunch, so wash it down very nicely with a little bit of a morning wake up call.
I like it a lot, and I like how whenever you go into these pairings, you really have to paint a picture beforehand.
I try to do my best. I really do. It's like going back to those drafts.
Yeah, it was also really, really cold today. I was outside as well for even just a little bit, and I was like, oh my gosh, get me back inside. It is freezing. But two other just drink specials that they have that are a little bit more for if you're getting a brunch party together, as you should call your friends and go head over to Mr. Sizzles for brunch. They have a mimosa party, which is a 750 milliliter bottle of bubbles with some fresh squeezed orange juice. And they also have, like PK mentioned on the show a little bit ago, the Bucket O Nooners, which is 5 cans of high noon seltzers, all in a nice little bucket for your morning to kick it off with a nice little brunch.
Yeah, so if you need any more information, make sure you go check out their menu because everything on it is absolutely delicious. You can follow them on Facebook, Instagram, or just head to MrSizzles.com. You can do a little cheat code and do what we did last Saturday and just order a little bit before you get there. And then when you get there, it's ready and you get to eat. So booda bang, booda boom. Don't all do it because, that would be mean and make my wait time longer. But let's dive into the goalies now that the Buffalo Bandits are going to be facing on Friday night. Nick DeMood, Phil's pick for goaltender of the year until he changed it back to Nick Rose. But he's 6-5, 11.21 goals against and a 79 save percentage. I am going to mention the backup here because he has played 122 minutes. Cam McLeod, 0-2 with 11.28 goals against and a 79 save percentage. So you're looking at the numbers. There's not a huge difference between the two. I believe Nick DeMood has the higher ceiling between the two, and I think he is their goaltender of the future, and he's shown it this year. He's had very, very high highs and a few low lows. So there are times where there could be a quick hook and pull him out of the game. So if you're in the belief of, getting the goaltender pulled, this might be the game to do it. But again, Halifax game didn't really benefit them when they got Warren Hill pulled.
Yeah, Nick DeMood, I was a huge fan of his going into this year. Thought he was going to take that really big step forward. Not that he's performing bad. I mean, 11.21 is pretty good. 79% is actually really good. I feel like anytime you're right around that 80% mark as a goalie in the NLL, you're looking at a pretty solid season. So I think for the most part, he's performing quite well. But like you mentioned, the backup has pretty much identical numbers. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of all plays out. Like you mentioned, if the Bandits kind of jump off to an early lead, will they at least switch for a little bit, see if they can jumpstart their own team, or will they just keep DeMood in to see how he does? But he's definitely not a bad goalie by any means in this league. So even though he's not having the breakout season I was kind of hoping for / boldly predicting, he's still a very good goalie, and he still will give the Bandits some problems. He's not Nick Rose, though, and the Bandits just put up 13 goals against...
14. Well, 13 against Nick Rose, but 14 total, yes. I see what you did.
Yeah, you got it. We're on the same page. So, yeah, I mean, if the Bandits offense can do that, I mean, I'm really just not worried too much about the Bandits offense until they give me a reason to be. I know we were getting a little nitpicky during their losing streak that we would have liked to see them just perform a little bit better because they were getting sloppy, even though they were still scoring well. But this last game, even after going 24 plus minutes without a goal, they still looked really good and finished the game really strong against one of the league's best goalies and defenses. So if you put up 13 against them, I'm not overly concerned about them putting up a similar number against this defense and goalie.
So we went over the Panther City season so far. We went over some of the numbers for the team in general, and we went over the players with the goalie. Phil, what is your prediction for Buffalo v. Panther City?
I'm going, would you say they have to go under 10 or 10 or under?
It's 10 and under.
10. All right, so I'm going to go 13-10, same score that Toronto beat them by. And yeah, that's all I got, 13-10.
That's pretty much close to what I have, and I did a little bit of. I look for patterns in this, and it's the only one sitting on this show that's ever predicted the score
Oh
correctly,
my
and I've done
God,
it.
here
I've
we
done
go
it
again.
twice. I've done it twice here.
Predict
I
the
look
champions.
for pattern.
All right, predict the
Just
champions.
Phil, just take notes here if you want to predict one of these scores, right? Okay, this is what you look for. You look for little patterns, and you go over all the numbers, and you go in the lab and you calculate things. This is not just what do I think the score is going to be. I do put some work into this. I put some thought. I go into the labs. I do mathematical equations.
For all this work
And
you do, your percentage of two correct scores is not
What's
very
yours?
high.
What's yours? Yeah, you're sitting a bit of big old zero. So this is what I'm
I don't
thinking.
do the work.
The last two games, Buffalo has put up 15 and 14. 15 plus 14 is 29. You divide by 2, it's 14 and a half. Guess what? I don't round up. I round down. That's where I got 14. The math here, yes, it should say Panther City, they score 10 or less, they lose. I look for a different pattern. Buffalo's let in 14, then 12. Here's the pattern. They're letting in 10. So I got them 14-10 victory in Panther City on Friday night.
All right, so when it's 13-10, I use no signs at all. We'll see what happens.
We will see what happens. But, Phil, it is everybody's favorite time of the episode. It's the fastest milestone minute in all the land. All of these possible milestones can be found on X at Buffalo Sports Co. We post them on the lead up to each game, so if you missed one, don't forget you can listen back or you can just check for them there. Before we dive into them, there were 3 milestones that did happen that I did not notice that I'm going to mention here to give them the credit. Nick Weiss set a new season high in assist and points for his career. Ian McKay set a new season high in caused turnovers for his career, and Josh Burns set a new season high in caused turnovers for his career. So congratulations to those 3 players. And with that, away we go. Dylan Robinson is 3 loose balls away from 100 for his career. He averages 3.73 a game. Chris Cloutier is 2 goals away from tying Sean Williams for 10th place in Buffalo Bandits history. With 5 assists on Friday, Josh Byrne will move into a tie for 10th place in Buffalo season in a single Buffalo Bandits season with 62 assists, tying himself that he set back in 2022 with 8 points. On Friday night, Josh Byrne will move into a tie for 10th place in a single Buffalo Bandits season with 102 points, tying Dane Smith from 2019 and John Tavares from 2005. Josh Byrne is 6 points away from setting a new season high for his career. He is also 6 assists away from setting a new season high for his career. Ian McKay is 2 loose balls away from setting a new season high for his career. Chris Cloutier is 3 goals away from setting a new season high for his career. And the Dane Smith assist watch, he is currently 3rd place in a single Buffalo Bandits season with 72 assists. He's averaging 5.54 a game, and he's on pace for 99.69. So he's on pace to set the record, but he's a little bit behind hitting the century mark.
I know the century mark is insane. So it's crazy that he's even pretty much on pace to shatter a record and a height that no one's ever reached before, but the Bandits are averaging at least, we'll round down again, so 12 goals a game, and to think that he's not assisting on at least 5 of them, I feel like he will, or 6, is it 6 of them? I think he's just going to continue to be great and average that, and I hopefully against some of these weaker teams, not that this is one of those games in my opinion, but hopefully against some of the other weaker teams in this league that they keep playing, they just have one monster game that really gives him a little bit of a cushion, but something that you mentioned at the beginning that I think we need to mention in general, we've given Dane Smith a ton of credit, which he absolutely deserves for playing a lot of defense. But Josh Byrne, like you mentioned, 10 caused turnovers on the team is 6, tied with Matt Spanger. And Dane Smith is at 13, which is 4th on the team for caused turnovers. So Josh Byrne also not getting quite the credit he deserves for playing the amount of defense and just caused turnovers that he has so far. He's played not nearly the amount of shifts on defense that Dane Smith is, but he's still running back there quite often to stop transition plays and play a little bit of defense. And for him to have 10 caused turnovers himself, not only is it a new season high for him, but it's also just a really solid number for an offensive player. And for the Bandits to have 2 forwards in their top 6 on their team and caused turnovers is wild and just really a testament to how balanced this team can really be.
So as we're winding down the season, we're in week 17. There's only 21 weeks in this schedule. You brought it up while I was at work. I was like, okay, I can just do this really quick because I already keep track of this. We wanted to give a quick brief over on what the Bandits' current 2024 draft picks look like, because there's been a lot of trades. McCulley goes out, picks come in. They trade for Corey Highfield. They trade for Paul Dawson. Picks go everywhere. We keep track of that kind of stuff. So as of this recording and what we currently have, we don't know compensatory picks and stuff like that because that's tough to figure out in my brain. So there might be more picks out there that they have. Some of these picks might be lower than they are because of compensatory picks. So these are just what they currently have on hand right now. They've got 3 first-round picks. They got themselves, they got New York's, and they got Rochester's. Second round, they only have Vancouver's. Third round, they only have New York's. Fourth round, they have themselves. Fifth round, they have Buffalo's and Rochester's. And sixth round, they have Buffalo's and Toronto's. So that is currently what is on the docket for them right now. So if you're looking at the scoreboard and you're more caring about, what do the picks look like? Because I've seen that going around a lot is how many first round picks they have and what they can do with those and all that kind of stuff. But if you're also looking for, hey, Buffalo has New York's pick. If they lose a couple more games, how high can that get? That's more what you're looking for is the league around. If you're not worried about, if you don't even think New York's going to make the playoffs, you're going to think how far can they sink down to make that draft pick as high as possible. Those are the picks they currently have on hand.
Yeah, and then so what those would possibly be currently, if everything held for the standings for the rest of the year, their 3 first-round picks would be 6th from New York, 9th from Rochester, and their own would be 11th. Again, compensatory picks, we have no idea, and that can move things around. But right now, their highest pick, if everything stayed the exact way it is currently, would be 6 overall. And then the Vancouver pick, which they are currently really bad. They are second worst in the league. So this would get bumped back because of those extra picks. I mean, we saw it, I think last year there was almost like, a full round extra in the first round. It was weird. There were a lot of extra picks. So the second pick of the second round probably would be much lower than this, but currently it would be 17th overall. So pretty good, but honestly, with what we're seeing, and I mean, it doesn't look good for my bold prediction, but I think you would want New York more than anything to continue to sink. Rochester's been on quite the hot streak, and they're looking pretty good. They are currently in a playoff spot, so I think they're going to be fighting really hard. New York's just out of a playoff spot, so they're obviously also going to be fighting really hard, but I think New York just has a better chance to fall, but they've also played 2 more games than Rochester, so if Rochester loses those 2, they'd be in the same spot that New York is in. So pretty interesting overall. I do think New York has the highest chance of dropping lower, and I think that's kind of what you're hoping for, to see what it would turn out to be. But this is way down the line, but we've also heard rumblings that this draft is one of the weaker ones, so I wouldn't be surprised to see the Bandits try to package and push their picks to a different year as well, especially having 3 first-round picks in a weaker draft class. You might want to package some of those together and try to push it down the road like we've said to do with pretty much all their picks.
So now that you know what picks Buffalo actually still owns, let's look at who you're going to be rooting for and rooting against on the NLL Outlook. There's only 2 Friday games. Buffalo's one of them. The second one is Albany versus Calgary at Friday at 9 o'clock. Star-studded Saturday. Halifax is in Toronto. Very, very important matchup there at 7 o'clock. Vancouver travels to Philly at 7 o'clock. Saskatchewan versus New York, the rematch from last weekend. It starts off at 7:30. Rochester is in Colorado. Rochester looking to win 4 in a row and get back over 500. Saturday at 9 o'clock. And then the late game, Vegas is in San Diego at 10 o'clock. And then there is one Sunday game. Saskatchewan, back-to-back games. They go to Georgia. Back-to-back games, and both of them are on the road Sunday at 5:30.
Huge weekend for the Rush, number one. I think if we're looking at it, I think you would want them to lose to New York and then beat Georgia, I believe. Because I don't think you really want them winning both and being up in 7-6. I know you have the tiebreaker over them, but I don't love that if they beat New York. I mean, that kind of puts them at 6-6, and I think lose to New York. I don't think New York really goes anywhere, but if they beat Georgia, I think that's huge as far as keeping the Bandits ahead, and also you do have the tiebreaker over the Rush, so them climbing isn't too scary. And then Halifax and Toronto, we did this a little bit last weekend with some of these close games where the Bandits are in the standings. You personally, are you cheering for Toronto in that one to try to drop Halifax a little bit closer?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still at, what's around you, how far you
Yep.
can climb, and how much distance you can make.
Yeah, so I think if Toronto
I've
does
kissed
win
this
that,
first 2 seeds away. I don't think that's happening. I've kissed those goodbye.
the first three, yeah, agreed. I mean, San
Yeah,
Diego
yeah.
would be interesting if they fell, but I don't think they're going to. So to me, I think it's a
Agreed, yeah.
really big fight for fourth. And this weekend alone, I mean, if you win and Halifax loses and Georgia loses and Rochester, I don't see them losing. But if they lose, I mean, you're looking much, much better. And I think you would be in, no, you wouldn't not be in four. You might be in fourth because they would be 8-7. You'd be 8-6. So in theory,
Yeah,
I
you would
think
have a better
winning percentage. Right?
yes.
Yep. So you could jump as high as fourth this weekend, which would be crazy, given that this team was under 500 recently, but could be a really big weekend for standings, like literally every single weekend is from now until the end of the season, and has been every weekend from the start. Unified standings have been really intense, but a lot of fun to follow.
So we're right around that hour mark. We're going to cut it right here. Phil, is there anything else you would like to add to this episode before we get ready for a late, I think it's, 8 o'clock start for
I think so.
Buffalo
Their schedule
Panther
still
City?
says 7, but I think it's because their time zones are off, so I believe it's
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's an 8 o'clock game. Yeah.
They got to really adjust that for the Eastern time zone.
But real quick, we just want to thank everybody that has partaken in Mr. Sizzler's Tap That Tap Room. If you've gone there because of us, or if you just go there in general, that really helps them out and it really helps us out. So really appreciate anybody that's going to both of those locations. So thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. On the next episode, we'll go over that Buffalo Bandits versus Panther City game and then the Sabres versus Oilers. And depending on time, I might have a game for Phil. I know I've been teasing that for a while, but we'll see how long that episode goes. I like to keep it around an hour, and I'm we're already jam packed with stuff. I might have to wait a little bit longer, but thank you thank you to Tap That Tap Room and Mr. Sizzles for sponsoring us and this episode. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Reminder, Phil's article drops every Tuesday. You can go read the Rock versus Buffalo article that came out last Tuesday. And then my power rankings come out every Thursday. My week 17 power rankings did just come out yesterday. Subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure you leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, bye-bye.